Hey guys, welcome back. This is the MMA Breakdown, doing predictions for UFC Fight Night 74, Holloway versus Oliveira, taking place in Saskatchewan, Canada, on the 23rd of this month, August. And the main and co-main event, I think, are really good. Holloway versus Oliveira, Story versus Silva, very relevant fights. I'm excited for those. And even a couple of the fights below that, I think, are interesting matchups. Cote and Burkman, Laprise and Trinaldo. And other than that, you have some prospects worth paying attention to, especially Marina Moroz. Um, but the preliminary card and these couple of fights opening the main card, I'm not terribly excited for. But anyways, let's get right into this. I'm going to try to keep it shorter than usual. I want my videos to be a little shorter than they typically are. But don't forget to follow me on Twitter, link in the description, at MMA Breakdown 0. Alright, so starting off with the Fight Pass prelim card at lightweight, Shane Campbell versus Elias Silverio. Shane Campbell, I thought he looked pretty good against John Makdessi, coming in on short notice. Was landing some good leg kicks and some good punches in that fight, and eventually, got caught and went down. Makdessi proved to have the power advantage. But I thought he looked pretty good, and I'm interested to see more of him. Elias Silverio, from this, I remember this guy's first fight in the UFC against João Zeferino, and it was just a horrible fight to watch. Both guys looked like really unskilled fighters. But since then has gone 2-1 and has proven to be a pretty solid grappler. Was able to drag down Isaac Valley Flag and ragdoll him. Seems physically stronger than his opponents most of the time. Against Ernest Chavez, got the late submission. And in his last fight against Rashid Magomedov, I thought it was in the fight, was losing, clearly getting outboxed, and ended up getting put away right at the end of the fight. But I think he's a decent fighter, has grappling skills, and usually has that strength advantage. Shane Campbell looked good. I think he would have the advantage if they stayed on the feet, but I like Silverio to get it to the ground and out-grapple him. Don't know much about Campbell's ground game at all, but until a fighter proves that they can fend off a strong grappler, I got to go with the grappler. So I'm going with Silverio. All right, next up at flyweight, Chris Kelades versus Chris Beal. Everyone loves Patrick Houlihan, but nobody seems to really give Kelades credit for a pretty sound win over him. I thought Kelades looked good in that fight. Was able to out-grapple Houlihan, and had the better scrambles, and on the feet, pretty effective in closing the distance, getting past Houlihan's reach and length. And I actually picked him to win his last fight against Ray Borg, but he got dominated there. Was not strong enough to compete with Borg on the ground, really got manhandled and ragdolled, couldn't get up off of his back, and was just completely shut out in that fight. But Chris Beal, I think, has zero chance of doing that to Kelades. Chris Beal, he looks like a good athlete. Everyone was excited about this guy since his time on Tough 18, but lost to Holdsworth in the house, and I haven't been impressed with him at all since coming into the UFC. His striking looks very unrefined, very rudimentary. Doesn't really make use of his athleticism. Got the flying knee knockout over Patrick Williams, but did not look good up until that point. Even against Tateki Matsuda, I thought he was getting out jabbed and just won on some takedowns. He got briefly. And then his last fight against Neil Seery, I thought that was just a horrible performance. He's fighting a guy who was much older than him. I think Seery's close to 40. And, he was the first to gas. He gassed early and gassed badly. And even when he was able to get on top of Seery, he was losing the fight from top position. Seery would get mission control and elbow him from the bottom, and was, I thought, clearly outscoring him in that position. So I'm not a believer in Chris Beal. Kelades has a win over a guy who's done pretty well in the UFC, Patrick Holohan. I like Kelades to out-grapple Beal here, so got to go with Kelades. Next up, moving on to the Fox Sports 1 prelim card at lightweight, Sam Stout versus Frankie Perez. Sam Stout, this guy just needs to retire. It's as simple as that. He's got knocked out in his last 2 fights. Got knocked out against Ross Pearson, and before that got knocked out even more quickly against KJ Noons. And his only wins in the last 2 years have been against Carlos Fedor and Cody McKenzie, which I think it's very fair to say that those are not relevant wins at all. And was also taken out by James Krause in between those wins, was submitted. So I just think Stout's chin is gone. And for a guy who is known as a striker, he really had to resort to takedowns over the last few years to get wins over Spencer Fisher and Carlos Fedor. And he's not a great wrestler. He's not a great ground fighter. So to me, that just tells me that he doesn't really have confidence in his striking, and he's not a great grappler either. Frankie Perez got manhandled by Johnny Case in his UFC debut, and I think there's no shame in that. Johnny Case, I think, is a pretty special guy and a guy who's going to do big things, but was taken down over and over again and put away with ground and pound in the 3rd round, I believe. Sam Stout is the veteran, but at this point, I just really can't take him to win a fight. I don't trust his chin, and I really don't know anything about Perez's game. Only what we saw against Johnny Case, which we really didn't see anything. But I can't go with Stout. Got to go with the younger fighter, Frankie Perez. And I think also what is kind of swaying me to pick Perez here for a lot of these fights for debuting fighters and fights I'm unsure about. I watched the MMANation.com Vivisection, the YouTube channel with Kid Nate and Zane Simon, and I believe Zane Simon, he picked Perez over Johnny Case back in their fight. So that gives me a little more confidence in taking Perez, but I don't trust Sam Stout to win any fights anymore. So going with Perez. And next up at light heavyweight, Marcos Rogerio de Lima versus Nikita Krylov. This should be a really fun fight. Rogerio de Lima, veteran from Tough Brazil 3. He lost, I think got a knockout in the house, and then he got submitted by Antonio Carlos Jr., the winner. And in the UFC, the guy is just a bulldozer, a really big, physical, strong guy, and has gotten very quick knockouts over his fellow castmate Richardson Moreira, and then in his last fight knocked out Igor Pokraitz in the 1st round. So really brutal knockouts, not over really strong competition, but has big power and he's effective with it. Nikita Krylov also has power, but not the same kind of one-shot knockout power that De Lima has. And he's shown a variety of skills, on the feet and on the ground. I've got the head kick knockout over Walt Harris, and in his last fight submitted Stanislav Nedkov. Also got a finish over Cody Donovan, but that was kind of a back and forth, even fight up until he got the finish. And I just think Rogerio de Lima, if these guys meet in the middle and trade, I think de Lima just has way bigger power, and Krylov will go down first. And we've seen Krylov been put out a couple times already by OSP and Soa Paleli. So I'm going to go with Rogerio de Lima here. I don't really like Nikita Krylov's chances to get him down and out grapple him. We saw him do some interesting stuff on the ground for a little bit against Paleli. I think he attempted an armbar and had him in a crucifix, but I really think De Lima is going to get an early knockout once they start trading here. So I'm going with Rogerio de Lima. All right, moving on at bantamweight, Yves Jabouin versus Felipe Arantes. this to me is really a tailor-made fight for Yves Jabouin. Really kind of an underrated veteran. Doesn't get much recognition, but a really solid fighter. An unorthodox striker and also an underrated grappler. I mean, this guy out-wrestled Mike Easton a couple fights ago. His last fight was taken out by what's his name? Thomas Almeida, a really surging prospect. Was taken out on the feet by him, but I still think Yves Jabouin is perfectly capable of beating a guy like Arantes. Arantes, not a very active fighter. He's been in the UFC since 2011 and has only fought 7 times. Not very active, and he's extremely inconsistent and doesn't really have a skill set that you can really define. You can't really describe him as a fighter. He's had fights where he's looked good on the ground. Reversed Godofredo Pepe and pounded him out from there. He had a win over Maximo Blanco, but that was a really back and forth fight, and I actually thought Blanco won that fight. But then outstruck by Kevin Souza and out wrestled by Andre Fili in his last fight. So very inconsistent and just doesn't really have much of a game. Yves Jabouin, I see him picking him apart at range. We saw Kevin Souza really effortlessly outstrike Arantes at range. And then on the ground, I could see Arantes being stronger if he gets on top. Again, showed good ground and pound against Pepe, but I think Yves Jabouin has good enough wrestling to not just get out wrestled here. So I'm going with Yves Jabouin. Yeah. Next up, last fight on the prelims, light heavyweight, Sean O'Connell versus Misha Cirkunov. I'm not going to be able to make a pick here. I don't know who Cirkunov is. Sean O'Connell, I think he looks like a decent fighter for light heavyweight, which is a really weak division. Impressed me in his last fight against Anthony Perosh. I took Perosh to win that fight, but O'Connell just came out and got right to work and took the hippo out early. But let's not forget, in his fight before that against Matt Van Buren, this guy almost got put out himself against a really kind of low-level fighter coming off of Tough. Doesn't seem to have the technical skills in his striking to hang with the better guys. Does have big power and was able to come back from being hurt to put Van Buren out. But I think against the higher-level strikers who even have a slight technical edge on him, he's going to have a lot of problems. I also thought he won the fight against Gian Vellante. I thought he pushed a good pace there and outlanded him for most of the fight and kept the pressure on him. But I also have a feeling if he has to fight on the ground, he's not going to do too well. Just looks like a one-dimensional power striker. But I'm not going to make a pick here, and let's move on. All right, the main card opening up with a women's strawweight fight between Marina Moroz and Valerie Letourneau. This is a really good matchup. Moroz, I'm really high on. I mean, she came out of nowhere, had a great win over Calderwood last time out. Just walked her down, chased her back into the fence. I think Moroz pulled guard and then submitted her with armbar very quickly. So I thought it was really impressive. And I had heard again from MMA Nation their prediction video. They were really high on Calderwood to win that fight. They were giving Moroz no chance. So she really impressed and looked great, looked like a killer. Valerie Letourneau, her debut against Elizabeth Phillips, I thought she looked okay. Was losing that fight early. Phillips was able to close the distance and make it a dirty brawl, but then Letourneau, her technical edge, she was able to establish the range striking and took over with the technical striking from there, won the decision. So I thought she looked decent there. But then against Jessica Rakoczy in her last fight, I didn't think she looked so great early. Got taken down and was eating some shots on the ground, but then locked up that triangle and submitted her. So I thought that was impressive. Looks to be well-rounded. I think she has a bit of that that typical TriStar game going on. Similar to a fighter like Nordine Taleb, who really has technical skills but doesn't really look too aggressive and doesn't chase the finish. And going off of Moroz's last performance where she just came out red hot, I got to go with Moroz here. I just got to go with Moroz going off of that last performance. But Letourneau is skilled, and I wouldn't write her off. But Moroz got the big win over the more highly touted fighter, so I'm going with Moroz. Next up at lightweight, Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Tony Sims. Aubin-Mercier, the finalist from Tough Nations, lost to Chad Laprise, who is on the next fight up. But Aubin-Mercier, a judo guy, and you can see he has the judo skills, but I don't think he gets to work early enough. Got a nice submission win, reverse triangle armbar thing against Jake Lindsay, and submitted David Machado in his last fight with a rear naked choke. But again, I don't think he gets to work early enough on the feet. He doesn't seem like he has much to offer. And in his last fight against Machado, who I think is just one of the worst fighters in the UFC, he got into a brawl with him and got tagged a few times. I think he even got dropped, but I don't think his judo skills, because of the way he fights, kind of laid back, and he lets guys come to him and doesn't really look to get it to the ground and impose his submission game early enough in the fight. I think Tony Sims is going to be too aggressive and looks like a pretty skilled boxer. In his last fight against Steve Montgomery, which was only back in June at the, not the Tough Finale, but I think it was the, the Machida Romero card, fought Steve Montgomery from the Ultimate Fighter, and ate a knee, looked like he was wobbled, but then came right back with a straight punch and knocked out dropped Steve Montgomery, and looked good. He has big power. And if Mercier gets into a brawl, I think Sims is going to catch him, and that's what I see happening here. Mercier's faced pretty weak competition in Lindsay and Machado his last two fights, and Sims doesn't look that weak to me. So I don't think and even against those guys, it's not like he got the finish right away. So I like Sims here. I know it's an underdog pick. But I'm going with Sims. I think he's going to get the knockout here. I really do. All right, next up, lightweight Chad Laprise versus Francisco Trinaldo. Chad Laprise, as we just mentioned, was the winner of Tough Nations. Beat Mercier in the finale. And then in his next fight, beat... who was it that he fought? It was Dennis Cedeno. But in the Mercier fight, showed really technical striking, but again, not a guy who chases the finish, is really content to just step back and pick guys apart from the outside. Did have a brutal knockout over Cajun Johnson in the house, but against Mercier, who is not a good striker, picked him apart, but isn't really that dominant, and that fight went to a split decision. I didn't think it was that competitive, but that could get him into trouble, I think. And then against Dennis Cedeno, completely switched it up. Went with the takedowns and was able to take him down at will. And got the body triangle, took the back. But again, never really came close with a submission, didn't do any damage. So seems to have a well-rounded game. And then his last fight against Brian Barberena, I really think we kind of saw his limits a bit. He came out a little more aggressive than he had been, but then... later in the fight, Barberena was able to turn it into a brawl, land his shots, and I think dropped him at one point or got on top of him, and definitely won that last round. And Francisco Trinaldo, the guy's good kickboxing. He's got solid grappling. He's strong when he gets on top of you, but the guy's just getting older and slower with each fight, and you can really see it. You know, his last fight against Norman Park, I didn't think he really did anything that great. I did pick him to win that fight, but was just kind of throwing lazy bombs, not really landing cleanly. Couldn't really take Norman Park down. And we've already seen him get out grappled by Chiesa, so not too impressed with Trinaldo at this point. Can get wins over low-level guys like Areola and Leandro Silva, but even in the Silva fight, didn't look too dominant. He gasses early. I want to take Laprise in this fight, but the way he got into a brawl with Barbarain, I could see that going against him, against a guy like Trinaldo. I'm going to take Laprise, though. I think Trinaldo's just getting... he's a little too old and slow at this point. Laprise, I think, is going to establish his range striking, keep him on the outside, and obviously Trinaldo being able to take him down. So at that point, I like Laprise to win with his technical striking and being the more youthful guy. So I'll go with Laprise here to win a decision. All right, next up at welterweight, Patrick Cote versus Josh Burkman. Not a great matchup. I think Burkman, for his age and probably not having a whole lot of time left in the UFC, I think he should be fighting more relevant guys. But I think this should be a good fight for him to get back on track and get a big win. Patrick Cote. I remember when this guy fought Tom Lawler back in 2010 and just got out-wrestled and laid and prayed and should have been submitted in that fight if he didn't grab the fence to escape. Then got cut, came back to the UFC, and really hasn't done anything too impressive. The wins over Bobby Volker and Kyle Noak, Joe Riggs, these aren't really good guys, but he does seem to have a straightforward attack in all of his fights, and that's going to the wrestling. Seems to have decent takedowns, and once it gets on the ground, can hold top position enough to win the round and win the fight that way. I think his chin is not going to be strong enough here, though, to hold up against Burkman. I mean, you saw Sakara just destroy this guy. I mean, before he landed the illegal elbows to the back of the head. I mean, Cote, I think, had him hurt, and then when he was following up, Sakara snuck something in and just put him on Queer Street. So I think Burkman's gonna have a huge advantage on the feet here, but I do worry that he could get out grappled. Burkman is a good submission fighter, but I think it's more likely that Burkman gets to him on the feet before Cote can establish the takedown game. Burkman, I was watching this guy in World Series of Fighting before he came into the UFC. Obviously was in the UFC before that, much earlier in his career. But, the guy's good striking and has power. He hurt Fitch, knocked out Aaron Simpson. The Steve Carl loss I didn't think looked too good. I mean, he was doing well in that fight. Almost choked out Steve Carl with a triangle, but then got choked out himself with a rear naked choke. Came back with another knockout over Tyler Stinson, and then got beat up by Hector Lombard and got put away by Duncan Kim in his last fight. But did have his moments on the feet. I think it was the second or third round. He came out really aggressively and put it on Kim. Had him backing up and had him hurt, but once he got to the ground and got him in the arm triangle choke, that was it. So I worry about Burkman's ground game, but I think he'll have enough aggression and power on the feet here to put Cote out. So I'm taking Burkman by knockout. All right, the co-main event at welterweight, Rick Story versus Eric Silva. This fight was supposed to happen. Also, I think this was on the Ultimate Fighter finale, but really intriguing matchup, and I'm looking forward to it. Rick Story, I think this guy is really underrated. He's not a guy who's really adding a whole lot of new skills, but you have to acknowledge that he got better. After the Damian Maia loss, I think he really tightened up his boxing, had the win over Ebersol, and then he had the finish over Quinn Mulhern, and then in his last fight against Gunnar Nelson, I actually picked him to win that fight. I think I described how he would win that fight perfectly, and you can go check out my prediction video for that. But I picked him to win a 5-round decision. I said he'd get it done with the boxing, but looked good in that Story fight. Gas towards the end. In the Nelson fight, gas towards the end. But kept the pressure on. Doesn't really have diversity in his combinations or in his striking, but just kind of stands his ground and throws hard punches. He looked good. You saw the submission offense against Leonardo Mafra. Thought that was a nice addition to his game we hadn't seen in a long time. But Eric Silva, this guy, since he's come into the UFC, he wins a fight against a really low-level guy, and the UFC gives him a top contender. Like fought John Fitch, Dong Hyun Kim, Matt Brown, lost to all those guys. And in between those losses, they'd give him another really low-level guy again. There was no kind of middle ground. And I thought that was really bad, but I feel like he's turned it around, even though he's only had 2 wins over Rose and Koscheck. Again, not really good mid-level challenges really at all. But even in the fights he loses, even against Matt Brown and John Fitch, the guy makes it really competitive, and it's really close. Almost choked out John Fitch in their fight, took his back, and in the Matt Brown fight, obviously almost finished him in the beginning, and again almost submitted him. So the guy's lethal on his feet. He once he gets it to the ground, he finishes it extremely quickly. Has a wide variety of submissions. And Story, he got taken out so easily by Damian Maia. I don't really see him having too much success here against Silva. If he keeps it on the feet, I think that's where Silva struggles. Dong Hyun Kim was able to bang it out with him and eventually got the knockout. But I think Silva's more athletic. I think he's going to have a huge speed advantage. And at some point, I think he's going to get it to the ground, and from there, just have way better grappling than Story. Story, he has takedowns, but he's not really a good grappler. The guy was out-grappled pretty badly by Martin Kampmann for 3 rounds, out-grappled by Charlie Brenneman, and obviously Damian Maia. So I think Silva has the advantage here, and I think he can hurt Story on the feet. Story was dropped by Kelvin Gastelum and get the submission at some point. So Silva by submission. And then the main event, a really great matchup, but actually a fight that I don't think is as competitive as it seems to be on paper. But at featherweight, Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira. Now here's the deal with this fight. Max Holloway, first of all, this guy is just incredible, and I watched this guy from his first fight in the UFC, and I watched all his fights since then, and I really feel privileged having been able to do that, follow his career. And even from his debut fight against Dustin Poirier, was landing some stuff on the feet, got taken down and submitted with the armbar, but has really grown since then. Has become a great third-round finisher, really gets stronger as the fight goes on, and has added some submission offense, mostly just the guillotine after he has guys hurt. Finished Feely with the guillotine, and then Swanson after he hurt him. But against Swanson, you just saw the culmination of just drastic technical improvement, and very technical striking where he can just completely shut guys down and keep them at range easily. Against Swanson, all the kicks and the long punches. Was just picking him apart like a sniper from the outside, and hadn't looked nearly that effective with his striking. I mean, had taken guys out before, but more in kind of a brawling style where he just rushed forward and engaged, throwing big combinations like against Coruscant and Will Chope had him hurt, jumped on him. But had fought guys like Clay Collard and couldn't finish him until the third round, and that was kind of a back and forth fight. Just fought Cole Miller before that Swanson fight, and never really had him too badly hurt in that fight. That went 3 rounds, and then against a killer like Swanson, just totally picked him apart. Swanson couldn't do a thing, and then finished him off in that third round. I thought it was amazing and just such drastic improvement, a real superstar performance. And Oliveira, this guy's always been really impressive, has always been a really dangerous submission fighter, and I think has improved his striking pretty significantly. And the Jeremy Stephens fight really impressed me because he proved there that he's not just a great grappler if he gets it on the ground, but he will take you down even if you're a dangerous striker. I mean, Stephens couldn't create any separation there. Oliveira closed the distance easily, and within seconds, every time he got in within arm's length of Stephens, Stephens was soon fighting for his life, defending against the submission. So really effective at getting it to the ground. But on the feet, while he has shown decent striking, was able to stand with Edgar for 3 rounds and actually hurt. Edgar was he had some wear on tear on him after that fight. Oliveira has decent striking, struck with Lentz in his last fight, but I don't see him being able to stand with Holloway after that performance against Cub Swanson. I really think Holloway has just become deadly from the outside, and I don't see Oliveira really closing that distance. If he does get it on the ground, obviously he's very dangerous there. Has a great anaconda choke, has triangles, and is has guys in submissions very quickly upon touching the mat. But compare their fights with Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson, not a technical striker, was able to come right in, blast Oliveira, get him out of there easily. Holloway picked apart Swanson. He couldn't do anything to get inside. And, Holloway could come right at him and brawl. I don't think he's going to do that because that would give Oliveira a good chance to take him down. But I just think Holloway's a way more technical and way more skilled striker than Oliveira is. Especially in that last fight against Nick Lentz. I think he really showed that. Lentz was just kind of able to stand in front of him and kind of throw not really great shots, but was pretty effective and landed a lot of shots from inside against Oliveira, and got ragdolled at times. So I just see Holloway having the huge technical advantage on the feet, picking him apart from the outside, and I think he's going to get another late finish, 4th or 5th round. So I'm going with Holloway. Don't count out Oliveira. He can finish it on the ground, I think, but I think Holloway has really been more impressive in the level of competition he's fought, and more impressive as a striker. So going with Holloway. All right, guys, thank you for checking out my predictions. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Link is in the description, and I'll be back with my predictions for UFC 191, Johnson versus Dodson 2. Thank you guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.